Okay guys, so in this video I want to look at three examples of increasing difficulty, although neither of them are really difficult, but demonstrating increasing instances where students will often have a misconception about how to do this. Alright, so let's look at this first. Clearly, you probably guessed, all we're going to do with this guy right here is combine like terms. We want to simplify this, right, so that we don't have, for example, two x terms or two a terms. We just want all our variables to be combined into one term. Much simpler that way, right? All right, so let's take a look at what we have here. We have x plus 17a plus 3x plus 4x plus 8y plus 3a. Okay, so the way you want to do this is, obviously we're always going from left to right, right? So a good way to start out, especially if you're kind of new to this, is maybe to explicitly make a note of what our like terms are. Clearly we have an x term. We're starting with x, positive x, because there's not a negative sign in front of it. Then we're having plus 17a, not a like term. Then we have plus 3x, a like term. We have plus 4x, another like term. Then we have plus 8y, not a like term. Then we have plus 3a, not a like term. So there are all of our x's. Now let's take a look at our a terms, because the second term here is plus 17a. So we have positive 17a. And then we have plus 8, sorry, not my bad. We started with plus 17a. We have over here plus 8y, but that's not a like term. And then we have plus 3a, which is a like term. And then finally, we just have a lone term of positive 8y, which will not be combined with anything. All right, so now that we have our terms marked out, we're going to combine our like terms. We're going to start with the x terms. So we always want to go from left to right when we're combining terms. We always want to pay attention to the sign or the operation that's in front of each term. So let's take a look at this first term. There's just x, right? So there's no number written in front of that variable, right? There's no coefficient. So what that always means, hopefully we remember this, but we might not. If you don't remember, that's fine. It's easy to remember after you hear this. When we just have a variable with no number in front of it, we take that to mean 1x. So this is just 1x. We have 1x over here. Then we're adding to it 3 x's, so we have 1x, then we're adding 3 x's, then we're adding another 4 x's. So we have 1 plus 3 plus 4, that's 8 x's. So these guys combine, let me box this off, these guys combine to 8x. So our simplified x term is 8x, because we have 1x over here, right here, then we have 3 x's over here, then we have 4 x's over here. So if you have one of something, then you add 3 more of that thing, and then you add 4 more of that thing, you end up with 8 of that thing. And that thing, in this case, is a factor of x. We got rid of our x terms. All right, now let's work on our a terms. So our first a term here, we see plus 17a. That means we're starting with a positive term, 17a. Then if we look over here, we have plus 3a. So we start with positive 17a over here. We add another positive 3a. How many a's do we have in total? Positive 20. So we have an extra positive 20 a's here, and we're adding those terms together because we're combining. And when you combine two positive quantities, that means you're adding them together, right? And then finally, what's next? Just our only friend 8y, because it cannot be combined with anything. And now we have 3 terms. Can we do anything with this? Can we combine x's and y's and a's and say that we have one of something? No, we can't, right? We have 3 different variables, so this is the best we can do. This is fully simplified. Cannot combine these any further because they are not like terms. So our simplified answer is 8x plus 20a plus 8y. All right, let's take a look at what we have here. And as promised, this is one of those instances which students will often get tripped up on. Hopefully immediately looking at this expression, excuse me, immediately looking at this expression, you should see that there's a major difference between the couple examples we have recently done, that major difference is that we are not just adding terms together here. In some cases, we're subtracting terms. Like, let's look where we are here. As always, we're going to start from the left and move to the right, just like we read words, right? So we start with positive 10c, then we're subtracting 13a, then we're adding positive 2c, then we're subtracting 3q, then we're adding positive 4a, and we're subtracting 1q. Remember, when there's no number written in front of a variable, we mean that to be one of those variables. All right, so you might be a little bamboozled right now, but don't worry, that bamboozlement will be transient. You will understand this shortly. All right, so first of all, a good way to organize our thinking, let's just explicitly mark out all the different terms we're dealing with. So we're starting with the 10c, so let's mark that in pink, why not? Then we're subtracting 13a, we can't combine that with our c terms. What's our next c term? Our next c term is adding positive 2c, and that's all of our c terms, so that's that taken care of. All right, let's take a look at our next term, moving from left to right, that's our a terms. So look here, we're starting with, so the first time we see an a term, we're subtracting it. So we have here minus 13a. We interpret that by saying we're starting with negative 13a, okay? Because this is the same thing as saying plus negative 13a. If we wanted to, we could think of all of these terms being subtracted as adding the negative, right? So we can actually think of this all as addition problems, but whenever we see a subtraction, we can think of it as adding the negative. If that confuses you a little, don't worry about it. But since we are starting with minus 13a, we're considering that negative 13a. And then where's our next a term? Over here. We're starting with negative 13a and we're adding 4a. All right, and what's our last kind of terms? We have here negative 3q or minus 3q. So since the first time we see a q term, we're subtracting, we're going to think of that as starting with negative 3q, and then we're subtracting another 1q. All right, so now let's get to combining these together. All right, start with our c terms. We're starting with a positive 10c, and we're adding positive 2c. So if we have 10 c's and add 2 more c's, we have positive 12 c's, right? So that's our simplified c term, 12c. All right, so what about our a terms? Well, we're starting with negative 13a, and then we're adding positive 4a, right? So if we have negative 13a and we add positive 14a, that means we have negative 13 plus 4a, right? Having a negative really doesn't change the way that you combine your like terms. You still just perform the arithmetic operation with the coefficients. All right, hopefully we remember from our negative number lessons how to do this. Negative 13 plus 4, that's negative 9. So we have negative 9a. So that means we have a term of negative 9a. And remember, we're combining all of these terms together. So we're starting with positive 12c, and we're adding to it, combining it with, not really combining it with, I should say, but adding to it negative 9a. So remember, when you add a negative number, you're subtracting, right? So we're subtracting 9a. So to represent the fact that we have a term of negative 9a, in our simplified expression, we're writing that as minus 9a. All right, so now let me get rid of some of this work here. So we have some more room. All right, and what about our q terms? First time we see a q term is minus 3q. So we're starting with negative 3q, and then we're subtracting 1q. Again, hopefully we remember from our negative arithmetic lesson. If we have a negative 3 and then subtract 1, that's negative 4, right? So we have a simplified term of negative 4q. We want to add that to our simplified expression because we're adding all these terms together, right? And how do you, when you have a term of negative 4q and you try to add it to an expression. How do you add a negative number? You subtract, right? So adding a term of negative 4q is the same as subtracting 4q. All right, so here is our simplified answer, 12c minus 9a minus 4q. And what that says is we have this expression and we have 12c's, we have minus 9a's, we have minus 4q's, right? And when we add these all together, we're adding two negative terms here, right? And just in our simplified answer, we're just writing that we're adding those negative terms as subtraction. Okay, everyone, let's look at one more example here. So we have this big old expression and we want to simplify it by combining like terms, right? Okay, so what's going on here? We're starting with the term of minus y. So we're starting with negative 1y's, then we're adding 3v, then we're adding 11y, then we're subtracting 9r, then we're subtracting 10v, then we're adding 3r. All right, so let's start with our y terms. We start with negative 1y's, and then we add 11y's to it. So if we have negative 1y's over here and we add positive 11y's, that means we have negative 1 plus 11y, right? And hopefully we remember negative 1 plus 11 is positive 10, right? So our y term is positive 10y. All right, so now let's take a look at our v's. We have our second term plus 3v, so that means we're starting with positive 3v, and then our next v term is over here. The next time we see v, we're subtracting 10v, so that means we have positive 3 minus 10 v's, right? And positive 3 minus 10 is negative 7, right? So we have negative 7 v's. All right, so let me, create some room here. So we have negative 7 v's because 3 minus 10 is negative 7. So we're adding to our simplified term negative 7v, right? Because our v term is negative 7v, where I'm adding all of our different terms together. So we're adding to our final answer negative 7v, which remember is the same as subtracting 7v. All right, minus 7v here. And finally, we have our r terms. So the first time we see r, we see minus 9r. That minus 9r means we're starting with negative 9r, and then we're adding to it positive 3r. So how many r's are we going to have? We're going to have negative 9 plus 3 r's, right? Negative 9 plus 3 is negative 6. So we're going to have negative 6 r's in our final answer. So our final answer, we are going to add to our final answer the number of r's we have, which is negative 6 r's. And since we're adding a negative term to our final answer, adding a negative is the same as subtraction, right? So we're subtracting 6r. And here is our final answer, 10y minus 7v minus 6r.